The damage goes further down the row. This fix won't be enough.
I know, but we have to secure what we can for now. We'll reinforce the rest tomorrow.
I still remember the sound that fence made when it finally snapped. Not the wood. Not the nails. I mean the silence after it happened. Because that was the exact moment I realized my best friend's mom had been crying behind me the whole time, and I hadn't noticed once. My name's Tyler. I was 26 back then, living in a small rental house outside of Columbus. I worked deliveries for a restaurant supply company. Nothing exciting. Mostly early mornings, bad coffee, and carrying 50-pound boxes into kitchens that smelled like grease before sunrise. I lived alone. Well, technically with a dog named Murphy who hated thunderstorms and slept like a divorced dad on my couch. My life was simple. Quiet. And honestly, I think I liked it that way because I didn't have to think too hard about where I was headed. Most nights, I'd stop by my best friend Nate's place after work. We'd known each other since middle school. Same football team. Same dumb tattoos at 19. Same habit of pretending we had our lives together when we absolutely didn't. Nate was the kind of guy who could walk into a gas station and somehow leave with 3 new friends. Loud. Funny. Always talking. I was the opposite. And somehow it worked. Back then, Nate was living with his mom temporarily after a breakup. He kept saying it was just for a couple months, but even he didn't sound convinced anymore. His mom's name was Claire. And before any of this happened, she was just Nate's mom to me. That's it. She'd known me since I was 14. Used to drive us to basketball practice in this old silver Honda that smelled like peppermint gum and sunscreen. I remember she always hummed while driving. Never sang. Just hummed quietly like she forgot other people could hear her. At 47, Claire had this calm energy about her. Not flashy. Not dramatic. Just steady. Like the kind of person who remembered birthdays without Facebook reminders. The kind who asked how your mom was doing and actually listened to the answer. After Nate's dad left years earlier, it had mostly just been the two of them. And you could feel that history in the house sometimes. Not sadness exactly. More like exhaustion that had settled into the walls. Anyway, the fence happened in late October. Cold wind. Gray skies. Leaves everywhere. I'd just gotten off work when Claire called me. Not Nate. Claire. I almost didn't answer because I figured it was accidental. But then I picked up and heard her sigh before she even spoke. Tyler, hey. Sorry to bother you. I remember leaning against my truck. You okay? Yeah. Well, kinda. The fence behind the house collapsed during the storm last night. I laughed a little. Okay? And Nate's working doubles all week. There was this pause. Then she said something that sounded almost embarrassed. I tried fixing it myself and made it worse. I don't know why, but that made me smile. I could literally picture her standing there with gardening gloves and a hammer she didn't know how to use. So I told her I'd come by. And that should have been the whole story. Just a favor. An hour of work. Maybe 2. But some things don't feel important when they start. That's the dangerous part. When I got there, she was standing in the backyard wearing this oversized gray sweatshirt and holding 2 mugs of coffee. The fence really was destroyed. One entire section had tipped inward. Boards cracked. Posts leaning sideways. Claire handed me a mug. I know nothing about fences, she admitted. I looked at the damage. Honestly? Neither do I. She laughed. And I swear, that was the first moment something felt different. Not romantic. Not even close. Just different. Like I suddenly noticed she was a person outside of being somebody's mom. That sounds terrible to say now. But it's true. While I worked, she stayed outside nearby. Mostly pretending to rake leaves. Sometimes asking questions she clearly didn't care about. How do you know where the nails go? I don't. That's comforting. I laughed. She laughed. The whole thing felt weirdly easy. Around noon, she disappeared inside. A minute later she opened the back door and yelled, "Finish the fence and I'll make lunch." I remember joking back. What kind of lunch? Depends how straight the fence is. Then probably fast food. She smiled at that. Not a huge smile. Just enough. And for some reason, I remember it clearly. Too clearly. After I finished the first section, we ate grilled cheese and tomato soup at the kitchen counter. Rain tapped softly against the windows. The TV was on low volume in the living room. Some cooking show neither of us watched. It should have felt normal. But something about the quiet felt heavy. Not uncomfortable. Just noticeable. Claire kept rubbing her thumb against the edge of her mug while staring at nothing. Finally I asked, "You all right?" And she answered too quickly. "Yeah." Then a second later, "I'm just tired." I nodded. Didn't push. But before I left, she thanked me twice. Not casually either. Like she genuinely meant it. And when I drove home that night, I caught myself thinking about her. Not in a bad way. More like, I couldn't stop replaying the silence between conversations. A week later, she called again. Another section of fence had started leaning. I joked that her backyard was trying to escape. She laughed harder than the joke deserved. So I came back. Then again the next weekend. Then once more after that. At some point, fixing the fence stopped being the reason I was there. I think we both knew it. But neither of us said it out loud. Sometimes Nate would be home. Sometimes not. And when he was there, everything felt normal again. We'd watch football. Eat junk food. Talk trash. But then he'd leave for work or disappear upstairs, and suddenly the whole energy of the house changed. Subtle. Quiet. Dangerous in a way I couldn't explain yet. One night, Claire asked if I could help move a bookshelf into the garage. Afterward, we sat on the back steps because it had started drizzling. The yard smelled like wet dirt and cold air. She wrapped her arms around herself and said, "You know what's weird?" "What?" "I spent so many years wanting silence in this house." I looked over at her. "And now?" "Now it's too quiet." That stayed with me. Because I understood exactly what she meant. I think loneliness recognizes itself sometimes. That was the problem. Weeks passed. The weather got colder. I started finding reasons to stop by even when Nate wasn't there. Dropping off food. Helping with small repairs. One time I changed a light fixture that definitely could have waited. And every time, there'd be these tiny moments that lingered too long. Eye contact that didn't break fast enough. Conversations that drifted personal without warning. Like one night when we were cleaning up after dinner and she suddenly asked, "Do you ever feel like your life paused somewhere?" I dried my hands slowly. "Yeah." "When?" I thought about it. Then shrugged. "Honestly? Probably after college didn't work out." She nodded like she understood more than I'd said. I think mine paused after my divorce. There was no music playing. No dramatic moment. Just dishes drying beside the sink while rain hit the windows. But something shifted there. Something real. And looking back, I think that scared both of us. Around that time, Nate started dating someone new. A nurse named Emily. Which meant he was home less and less. And somehow that made things worse. Because the less he noticed, the more guilty I felt. Nothing had technically happened. But emotionally? Emotionally, something absolutely was happening. I started catching myself thinking about Claire during random parts of the day. Driving between deliveries. Standing in grocery store lines. Lying awake at night. And every single time, I'd tell myself to stop. Because this was Nate's mom. Because she trusted me. Because crossing that line would destroy everything. But emotions don't care about logic. That's the ugly truth nobody talks about. One Friday night, I stopped by after work because Claire texted asking if I could help bring in patio furniture before a storm. Simple enough. Except when I got there, the power was out. The whole neighborhood was dark. Candles flickered inside the kitchen. Claire opened the door wearing sweatpants and one of Nate's old hoodies. "You came," she said softly. "Yeah. Thought you might need help." The storm outside sounded huge. Wind rattling branches. Rain hammering the roof. We dragged furniture into the garage together while freezing rain soaked through our sleeves. At one point she slipped on wet concrete. I caught her arm. And for maybe 2 seconds, neither of us moved. I still think about that moment more than I should. Not because anything happened. But because of the way she looked at me after. Like she realized something at the exact same time I did. We let go immediately. Went back inside. Didn't mention it. But the silence afterward felt louder than the storm. Later, we sat in the kitchen eating soup straight from the pot because the stove barely worked without power. Claire laughed quietly. "This is depressing. It's kinda cozy. Only because you're not alone." That hit harder than she probably intended. And honestly, if you've been listening this far, maybe like the video and subscribe. I don't usually tell stories like this, and the support genuinely means more than you think. Anyway, that night was the first time I seriously considered pulling away. Because I knew where this could lead. And I knew nobody would come out clean. Especially Nate. But then Claire started talking. Really talking. About getting older. About feeling invisible. About how strange it was watching her son become an adult while she still felt stuck somewhere in her 30s mentally. "I know that sounds pathetic," she said. "It doesn't." She stared into her soup. "I spent so much of my life being somebody's wife, somebody's mom." Her voice almost cracked there. "And now I don't know who I am when nobody needs me." I didn't know what to say. So I just listened. Sometimes that's worse. Because listening creates closeness people don't expect. When I finally stood to leave, she walked me to the door. The candles behind her cast shadows across the hallway. For a second it looked like she wanted to say something. Instead she just whispered, "Drive safe, Tyler." But her hand brushed mine when I grabbed my keys. Accidentally. Probably accidentally. Still, I thought about it the entire drive home. After that, things became complicated fast. Not outwardly. Nobody looking at us would have noticed. But internally? I was falling apart. I started avoiding Nate because guilt made me feel sick. And that made him notice something was off. One afternoon he asked, "You good lately?" "Yeah." "Why?" "You've been weird." I laughed it off. But my stomach dropped so hard I barely heard the rest of the conversation. Because he trusted me completely. That's the part one still hate myself for. A few days before Thanksgiving, Claire called crying. Not loudly. Just quiet crying. The kind people do when they're trying not to be heard. I drove over immediately. Turns out she'd gotten into an argument with Nate. Something stupid about bills and him moving out eventually. But underneath it was years of resentment neither of them talked about properly. When I got there, she was sitting on the back porch wrapped in a blanket. Cold air everywhere. I sat beside her without speaking. For a while neither of us said anything. Then suddenly she laughed through tears. "You ever look at your life and think, this can't be it?" I looked down at my hands. All the time. She leaned her head against my shoulder then. Very lightly. Like she wasn't sure she should. And I swear my heart nearly stopped. Because that tiny moment felt more intimate than anything physical ever could have. I should have moved. I know that now. But I didn't. We sat there like that for maybe 30 seconds. Maybe a minute. Long enough for everything to change. When she finally pulled away, she whispered, "I'm sorry." I shook my head. It's okay. But it wasn't okay. Not anymore. After that night, I stopped sleeping properly. I'd replay every conversation. Every glance. Every silence. Trying to convince myself I imagined it all. Then December came. And with it, the moment I can never forget. Nate had gone away for the weekend with Emily. Claire asked if I could help bring Christmas decorations down from the attic. I almost said no. I should have said no. But instead I showed up Saturday afternoon carrying coffee like an idiot pretending everything was normal. The house smelled like cinnamon candles. Old Christmas music played softly somewhere upstairs. For the first hour, things actually felt okay. We joked. Untangled lights. Argued over whether fake trees counted as real effort. Then we found this old box of family photos. And everything slowed down. Claire sat on the floor flipping through pictures silently. Young Nate. Beach trips. Birthday parties. A photo of her and her ex-husband smiling at some barbecue 20 years earlier. She stared at that one a long time. Then quietly said, "I don't even recognize her anymore." I sat beside her carefully. She looked happy. She was trying very hard to be. That line crushed me for some reason. Maybe because I understood it too well. A little later, while hanging lights near the staircase, she suddenly asked, "Tyler, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Have we crossed a line?" Everything inside me froze. The house felt completely silent. I could hear the refrigerator humming downstairs. I could hear my own breathing. And still, I answered honestly. "I think emotionally? Maybe." She nodded slowly. Not shocked. Not angry. Just sad. I've been trying not to think about it. "Me too." Then came the longest silence I've ever lived through. Finally she whispered, "This can't happen." I knew she was right. That should have been the end. But instead, she started crying. And without thinking, I stepped closer. She covered her face. "I'm sorry. I'm just tired of feeling alone all the time." I remember touching her arm gently. That's all. Just her arm. But when she looked up at me, something broke. Not dramatically. Not like movies. It was quiet. Painfully quiet. And then she kissed me. Soft. Hesitant. Brief enough that part of me wondered if it even happened. The second it ended, we both looked terrified. Actually terrified. Claire stepped backward immediately. Oh my God. I ran my hand through my hair. Neither of us spoke. Then suddenly headlights flashed through the front window. A car door slammed outside. Nate. I still feel sick remembering that moment. Claire wiped her face instantly. I practically jumped away from her. The front door opened. "Yo," Nate called out casually. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he'd hear it. He walked upstairs carrying grocery bags and stopped halfway. "You guys decorating?" Claire answered first. "Trying to." Her voice sounded almost normal. Almost. Nate looked between us briefly. And I swear for 1 second, one horrible second, I thought he knew. But then he just laughed. "Looks like Christmas exploded in here." I forced a smile. Pretty much. That night, I left earlier than usual. Claire didn't walk me out. Didn't text afterward either. And honestly, that silence hurt more than I expected. For the next 2 weeks, we barely spoke. I avoided the house completely. Nate kept texting asking where I disappeared to. I made excuses. Work. Family stuff. Feeling sick. Anything. Then one night, right before Christmas, Claire finally messaged me. Just 4 words. Can we talk tomorrow? I barely slept. When I arrived the next afternoon, snow covered the yard. The broken fence we'd fixed together was dusted white. Claire opened the door slowly. And the second I saw her face, I knew something was wrong. Bad wrong. We sat in the kitchen for almost 10 minutes before she finally spoke. I told Nate I'm selling the house. I blinked. What? I can't stay here anymore. Because of us? She looked down immediately. That's part of it. The room felt suddenly smaller. When? After New Year's. Everything inside me dropped. And here's the thing I didn't realize until later. Part of me expected her to say she wanted me to stop her. Like some stupid movie. But she didn't. Instead she said something I still think about all the time. Tyler, what happened between us wasn't really about us. I frowned. What does that mean? Tears filled her eyes again. It means we were both lonely. That hurt more than if she'd yelled at me. Because deep down, I knew she was right. She cared about me. I believe that. But I think I represented something else too. Youth. Attention. Comfort. A reminder that she still mattered to someone. And maybe she represented something for me too. A place to feel needed. Seen. Understood. We sat there quietly after that. No dramatic fight. No huge confession. Just 2 people realizing they'd wandered somewhere dangerous because they were lonely. Before I left, she walked me to the front porch. Snowflakes drifted through the air slowly. Everything felt strangely calm. Then she reached into her pocket and handed me something. An old photograph. It was from years earlier. Me and Nate at 16 standing beside that same fence in the backyard. Laughing. Completely unaware of how complicated life could become. I found it in the attic, she said softly. I stared at it for a long time. Then she whispered. You were family, Tyler. Were. Not are. That word stayed in my chest like a knife. I never saw her again after that day. She moved to Cleveland a month later. Nate eventually told me she wanted a fresh start. He sounded confused by it. Sad too. And the worst part? He still has no idea. At least I don't think he does. We drifted apart after that. Not instantly. But slowly. Like watching a rope fray one thread at a time. Last year, almost 3 years after everything happened, I got a package in the mail with no return address. Inside was that same photograph. The one of me and Nate by the fence. Only this time there was writing on the back. Just one sentence. In Claire's handwriting. You fixed more than the fence that winter. That was it. No name. No explanation. Nothing else. And honestly, I think about that sentence way more than I should. Because part of me still doesn't know if what happened between us was real. Or if we were just 2 lonely people standing too close to each other during the wrong season of our lives. But sometimes, late at night, I still remember the sound that fence made when it collapsed. And I swear, that was probably the first warning we should have listened to.